Am I audible, sir?
You're audible.
Good morning, one and everyone present here. On behalf of the PG Department of English, Bankura Christian College, I, Bipasha De, undergraduate honors semester 6 student of the department, welcome you all again to the fifth day of the International Web Lecture Series hosted by Department of English, Bankura Christian College. A very warm greetings and welcome to all the dignitaries, faculty members, research scholars, students, and one and everyone present here on these virtual platforms, either on Google Meet Forum or over YouTube. We are very much honored to have among us today two eminent speakers, Dr. Sharbani Banerjee Mukherjee, Associate Professor of English, TDB College, Raniganj, and Professor Anshuman Kaur, Assistant Professor of English, Department of English and Culture Studies, the University of Burdwan. A very warm welcome to them. Before I request Dr. Sharbani Banerjee Mukherjee, ma'am, to go ahead with her deliberation, may I request Professor Oyon Mondol, Assistant Professor and Head of the Department of English, Bankura Christian College, to formally introduce Dr. Sharbani Banerjee Mukherjee, ma'am. Over to you, sir.
Uh, Thank you, Bipasha, for giving me this opportunity. Uh, Welcome, Dr. Sharbani Banerjee. Dr. Sharbani Banerjee is an Associate Professor of English working at the Department of English, UG&PG of Triveni Devi Valotia College, Raniganj. She joined the college on the 4th of March 1991 and is teaching for 29 years now. Dr. Banerjee is an university topper, topping her BA Honours course in English from Vishwabharati in 1985. After pursuing her Masters from the same university in 1987, she earned her PhD in English from the University of Burdwan, working on Lawrence Durrell's The Alexandria Quartet. Dr. Banerjee served as a guest professor teaching postgraduate classes at the University of Burdwan, Kazi Nazrul University, Maulana Azad College and Deemed University, Kolkata. Her area of specialization is modern and postmodern English and American literature, and her areas of interest are as diverse as feminist studies, gender studies, Indian English novels, and post-colonial studies. She has presented papers at several national and international conferences and has published articles in many prestigious journals. She is the co-editor of the American novel From Hawthorne to Heller, Cultural Context and Critical Perspectives, published by Macmillan Education in 2019. She has written study materials for Burdwan University, publications for honors courses, bridge courses, and postgraduate courses, and also for Vidyasagar University publications for postgraduate courses. She is the UGC Visiting Fellow of English of the postgraduate courses at Sambalpur University since 2016. She has presented a paper at an international conference. She is a peer of the peer-reviewed online multidisciplinary journal on English studies entitled Postscriptum. She is PhD evaluator and adjudicator of SRM University, Chennai and Utkal University, Bhubaneswar. Dr. Banerjee is renowned in the academia as the graceful teacher who has won the hearts of her students since she joined her teaching profession. Without much ado, I welcome Dr. Banerjee again on behalf of the department. Over to Dr. Banerjee. Madam, please.
Thank you so much. Especially thank you for your very kind words. Uh, a lot of it is more honey than fat. But I would just like to take this opportunity to thank Bankura Christian College, where there are so many of my young brothers that it is like a second home for me. I had also been a presenter in their seminars before. And in this pandemic times, I thank them for allowing me this opportunity of sharing just a few words, especially with my students here. And the topic, I apologize for the topic because it sounds very big and loud, but as Macbeth says, that I'm sure that it is full of sound and fury and will not be signifying too much. But it is just a kind of a comparative correlative, that is the order of the day today, where I will be trying to club two texts from two centuries, actually, almost, from two eras, a pre-independence post-colonial text and a post-independent post-colonial text. And I will be presenting through a PowerPoint presentation, which I hope that all of you can see.
Madam, could you please use a earphone or something like that? The
Yes,
voice is not.
can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's audible now, ma'am. Now it's
Okay.
clear.
Okay, thank you so much.
So if you could hold the speaker a little closer,
Yes,
ma'am.
yes.
Okay.
As
Thank you,
usual,
ma'am.
I had forgotten about the speaker.
Thank you, ma'am.
So, as I said, that we are talking about post-colonial resistance in Indian aesthetics, and the adage is Tagore's Tashir Desh and Karnad's Nagamandala. So when let us take the words separately. What is post-colonial? If we have to understand what is post-colonial, we have to also realize what is colonial. And where did this colonization start? I want my students here to think what they had studied in their school history books, maybe in classes 6, 7, or 8, that colonization is all about acquisition and human attitude is about acquiring. But this colonization, is it the same as Caesar's colonization of the whole of Europe, going to England and declaring Veni Vidi Vici, or his, almost extending his Roman Empire up to the northern part of Africa? Is it like Alexander the Great, who braved difficult topography, difficult climates, and entered as far as India? We all know about how he defeated King Porus and left a Greek band of soldiers under Seleucus Nicator, returned home and died of fever at a very young age. Or is this colonization of a different flavor? If it is, we have to understand it. To my mind, the seed of colonization was planted as far back as 1453 with the fall of Constantinople. We all know, students and teachers of literature, that fall of Constantinople brought an end to the Crusades. The almost 150 years of, endless struggle between the cross and the crescent, between the Christians and the Mohammedans over a small city or sea town. And why was that? And why was the fall of Constantinople so important? Because Constantinople, then renamed as Istanbul, was the connecting point between the Western trade with the East. It was the sort of juncture of land route to India and China, because India and China were exporting certain things like spices, opium, tobacco, gold, precious stones, silk, and muslin that was not available in Europe, and the aristocracy and the rich of Europe had become used to that. So, with 1453, when this was completely blocked, then was the European drive for a sea route all across the world. They wanted to reach India by hook or by crook. That prompted Christopher Columbus to go towards America and land on the Caribbean islands, Amerigo Vespucci to America. Ferdinand Magellan sailed all across the world. And right at the end of the century, in 1498, Vasco da Gama discovers the sea reach to India and arrives at Calicut. These I consider are the seeds of colonization. which was planted into a sapling in my third marker date, that is 1662. We all have studied restoration when Charles II was restored to his throne. And he was wedded to the Catherine of Braganza of Portugal. And what did she bring with her dowry? As you can see there on the screen, she was gifted, her family gifted to England, the seven islands of Bombay, Tangiers, the northern town, trade town of Africa. And thirdly, the most important point, the right to free trade with all Portuguese colonies. Spices, cane, textiles and like silk and muslin, and most important, tea. It is believed that she taught the English people the art of drinking tea. So this right to free trade with all the Portuguese actually initiated the British imperialism as colonization took on a very, a strong sort of an impact on the Eastern and Western connect. So, jokes apart, colonization and imperialism goes hand in hand, because colonization is a kind of an exercise of your power over a weaker land, over a weaker people, over a weaker civilization who do not have at that point of time the power to fight back. And this rise of imperialism took alarming proportions because it gave rise to authoritarian rule. And this authoritarian rule was, more felt by Rabindranath Tagore when he was touring Europe in the 1930s, which is when he gave his talks on his theories of nation and nationalism, which became so popular then and even later on. That was the time when authoritarian regime had reached its peak, when Hitler was rising. It was then that he was, exercising and eschewing his views about nation and nationalism. It was also at that time when Mahatma Gandhi was giving the West a taste of Indian aesthetics in his, protest against the British in a very unique way. He hurt the colonizer at its weakest with the master stroke of fasting, passive resistance, and non-violence. His genius was in embodying the subaltern agency and resistance with stubborn passivity and rooted in the principled moral position of non-violent non-cooperation. So these are the first baby steps as protest against colonialism. So post-colonialism may be defined as that movement against the imperial oppressor that threatened to drown the voices of the weaker culture, the weaker race, the weaker country, and the weaker civilization. And post-colonial thoughts and philosophies have been, governed and regulated by numerous theories. If Tagore and Gandhi are if we call them the beginners of this movement, there are other across the world. There is Aimé Césaire's theory of negritude, Edward Said's Orientalism, Bhabha's theory of hybridity and mimicry, and Spivak's question that he placed to the world whether the subaltern can ever speak. So when we talk about post-colonialism, the first oppressing, obstruction came from the West itself, because as Robert Young says in his book, Post-Colonialism, A Short Introduction, which he published in 2003, he wrote that a lot of people don't like the word post-colonial. It disturbs the order of the world. It threatens privilege and power. It refuses to acknowledge the superiority of the Western cultures. Its radical agenda is to demand equality and well-being for all human beings on the earth. So post-colonialism and then the subaltern question began by Spivak and also by Guha, where he says that this post-colonial effect has, the subalternity of colonization of the especially Anglophone worlds was visible through politics, through history, through economics and sociology, which led to a dissensus that offloaded the attitudes, ideologies, and belief systems. Thus, colonization and post-colonization after that saw the breakdown of the omnipotence of the elitist historiography and allowed the silent voices an audience. The Scythian other reclaimed the center by breaking down oppression and repression. As I said previously, that in 1933, Tagore toured Europe, and it was also around this time when he was, touring and delivering lectures on his concept of nationalism. And he denounced the very concept of nation and nationalism as a dogmatic reorientation of colonization, where the mind is not free of its colonizing conceptualism. And this lack of freedom from colonizing modes will connect me or connect us from Card country or Tashet Desh to Nagamandala. Thus, freedom from domination ensures a free nation. But does that ensure a free humanity? That is the question that we will ask at the end. For this discussion, I have, taken the help of translation of Tashet Desh by William Radice, which is a very beautiful, almost a transcribed version of the Bengali. I will try to give a few examples of the translation here. Tashet Desh is a kind of a musical rhapsody. It is a musical drama. And it is believed that Tagore was inspired by Alice in Wonderland that made him, compose this imaginative rhapsody. And in this land of cards, most actions are forbidden as the card race follows. So Tashet Desh is a land of dogmatism. It is a land of rule, and the people, the citizens of card country, are divided into 4 card groups: the heart, the spade, the clubs, and the diamonds. Symbolically, they are talking and moving, but they are, two-dimensional. They are physically flat, ironically highlighting the narrowness of their vision and their philosophy. Now, in this land of cards lands a shipwrecked prince who is symbolical of the winds of change. And he comes, the prince, he sets sail in search of adventure because he was bored with his regal life. He said that our cage is so safe that our wings are limp. নিরাপদের খাঁচায় থেকে থেকে আমাদের ডানা আড়ষ্ট হয়ে গেছে. Remember, I want you to, take note of the word খাঁচা. It is a kind of a prison out of which the prince himself needs freedom. So he flew, rather he sailed, and came to a new land inhabited with new people in red and black uniforms. And what were they doing? They were standing, sitting, lying down, jumping up, all for no reason. And he laughs out, ha ha ha. সদাগর দেখছো ব্যাপারটা, লাল উর্দি কালো উর্দি উঠছে পড়ছে শুচ্ছে বসছে একেবারে অকারণে, ভারী অদ্ভুত. And he laughs out loud, ha ha ha. Here, though this is a musical play, and which has been canonized as almost children's literature, it is indeed a cleverly masked satire against the rigidity of Indian class system and the dogmatism, domination, imperialism of British rule. It is interesting to note that this text was written when Adolf Hitler was an emerging, powerful leader. So the play is set in a make-believe plastic world of cards, who are blind, lifeless followers of dictatorialism. The prince, a foreigner, he comes into this card country and realizes that every movement, thought, emotion, and reaction is measured and controlled in a class-ridden structure. Thus, this play reflects the conflict between the notion of free will as opposed and against totalitarianism. Much has been written about Tagore's notion of nation and nationalism. But here, I am going to focus not on that because that will need another paper altogether. I will rather highlight the fact that the prince sows the seed of free will, free thought, and independence of spirit that defies all subjugation and subversion. He initiates an emotional and passionate revolution that is interestingly led by the card women. And here the queen and Miss Hearts, মানে হরতনী, রানী এবং হরতনী, represent the historical subjugation and objectification of women in a society where there is no single dictator. Where it is the system which rules rule the land, rules within quotation, where custom and tradition are the dictators. And whenever I read Tashek Desh, I am often reminded of Gulliver's Travels. And just as Gulliver Swift satirized his contemporary world in the land of Lilliputs, in almost the same narrative technique, Tagore laughs at the mindless rigidity of his times. In Card Country, when culture is threatened, they enact the emergency laws of ear pulling and ear twisting. Kan mola or kan mochra noy. May I mention here in passing, this is again not my topic of discussion here, but the comic elements infused in the ways of card civilization may be termed as carnivalesque in nature, where Tagore uses the Bakhtinian weapon of laughter to project his dissensus. So here in the card country, the queen is already affected. When people are asked what is the meaning, when the prince asks what is the meaning, they say who needs rule, who needs meaning, rules are needed. অর্থের কি দরকার, চাই নিয়ম. But when the queen is asked to banish, she is also infected, by the joy of free will canvassed by the foreign prince. And she says that in the ladies' quarter of the palace, we have laws of our own. Banish him? Never. So she does not, accept the nirbashan that was ordered upon the prince. In all our theories of feminism, women have been writers, thinkers, have been, fighting, relentlessly working for the voice of women. Even if they are relegated to the dark recess of society, rendered voiceless, they have the power to reclaim their lost territory. So in the card country, it is the women who realize that the fixity of their regulated lives has stifled them from being living human beings, as it is they who first begin to break the rules. They metaphorically break out of their cages, where they lived as puppets. The prince notices this and he tells his merchant friend, can't you see what's happening to them inside? The first stirrings of life within the dolls and puppets. রাজপুত্র বলছে ভিতরে ভিতরে কি ঘটছে সেটা কি তোমার চোখে পড়ে না? পুতুলের মধ্যে প্রাণের সঞ্চার কি অনুভব করছো না? আমি তো শেষ পর্যন্ত না দেখে যাচ্ছি না. So Miss Spade বা ইস্কাবনী, she echoes the same sentiment. What's happening in Card Country? Can you see my love? What madness in the air have these foreigners brought? I can't seem to settle my mind. So you see, this is the change. This is the protest. The protest in the Indian, the Gandhian way, not of violence, but that of systematic, philosophical and thoughtful dissensus against the powerful authoritarian regime. It is the women who first break their own customs and rules and guiltily enjoy the first taste of freedom. The women share varying degrees of reaction. Miss Clubs throws down the mantle of fear. She says, I am not afraid of anyone. I am not a hypocrite like you two are. I'd rather be a live woman. চিরতনী বলছে, তা হয়েছে কি, আমি ভয় করি না কাউকে, তোমাদের মতো লুকোচুরি আমার স্বভাব নয়। ওই যে তোমাদের দহলানি সেদিন আমাকে মানবী বলে টিটকিরি দিতে এসেছিল, আমি তাকে স্পষ্ট জবাব দিয়েছি, তোমাদের তাসিনী হয়ে মরে থাকার চেয়ে মানবী হতে পারলে বেঁচে যেত। This is the evolution of post-colonialism, to break down from the shackles and to re-emerge, breathing free and standing up tall. So even the fear of banishment, of excommunication, cannot restrain the budding of their free spirit. When Miss Hart's Hortony is summoned to the King's Court, she asks Mr. Diamond to tell them that she has vanished, implying how much she has changed. She goes on to say, the person you are looking for is gone. You'll never find her ever. হ্যাঁ, হারিয়ে গেছি, যাকে খুঁজছো তাকে আর খুঁজে পাবে না কোনোদিন। So this, representation of a final breaking of shackles and emerging victorious as a living, breathing woman and not a caged animal. She says that they are changing clothes as I have. সাজ বদল করছে আমারই মতন। And we must remember that this changing of clothes, this dress imagery, is a very, very common, practice of writers since time immemorial, especially in the English literature. Those of you who have all studied Macbeth in your graduation classes remember how the dress imagery plays a very important part, and dressing of, changing of robes, dressing in new robes have always been synonymous with a change in identity, with a re-emergence, sometimes for the better and sometimes for the worse. So thus the old identity of the rigid laws of totalitarian dogmatism has been shown the door. Changing of clothes is metaphorical of changing identity and attitude. In the card country, the women inspire the men to change their conception of life and reality. Mr. Diamond is told, tear off your garments, rip them to pieces, be free, be pure, be whole. And Miss Queen, Miss Hearts, along with spades and clubs, lead the revolution of breaking down the norms and conventions of card country. A shocked priest proclaims, you're female, you should preserve peace. We are male, we must preserve culture. He says that ছি এমন কথা তোমার মুখে বেরোলো, তুমি নারী রক্ষা করবে শান্তি, আমরা পুরুষ রক্ষা করব কৃষ্টি। So this androcentric attitude is reflected later as the king of cards and the foreign prince debate over the relevance of rule and desire. This is very important because shattering the preconceived notion of card country womanhood, the queen proclaims that since in their language chains are called ornaments, it is time to forget that language. This brings me to the connection of the topos and the logos. And I want to read this Bengali version, this whole thing, the whole translation I have not kept here, for those who understand Bengali, because every metaphor is so important. Rani says, আমাদের তাসের দেশের ভাষায় শিকলকে বলে অলংকার, এ ভাষা ভুলবার সময় এসেছে। হ্যাঁ বিবি রানী, এদের ভাষায় জেলখানাকে বলে শ্বশুর বাড়ি, এরা হেঁয়ালিকে বলে শাস্তর, বোবাকে বলে সাধু, বোকাকে বলে পণ্ডিত, এরা মরাকে বলে বাঁচা, আর স্বর্গকে বলে অপরাধ। So you see, and every description is punctuated by the king, the Raja saying chup, 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 and chup. So this is the politics of suppression, silencing. So it is in this card country, or the metaphoric land of totalitarianism and dogmatism, language where nonsense is called scripture, idiots are called wise, and dead are called alive. It is the queen who proclaims at the end victory to desire, joy, itche joy, she says. And the king succumbs to her free will, and they propose to humanize gradually. The concluding song, again a very common popular Rabindra Sangit, Baad Bhenge Dao Bhango. That song of this musical rhapsody is a rejoicement at the victory of a life of creativity, laughter, and will, free will, that as opposed to a robotic existence of thoughtless pursuance of rules. This plays a unique allegory by Tagore, where people are able to break free from the colonizer's subjugation to reassert their identities as thinking, emoting creatures. The cards shed their narrowness and their two-dimensionalness, to become a whole, to become humans, marked by their multidimensionality, by allowing their innate desires to defeat the controlled convenience of customs and rules. That this revolution was led by women is Tagore's criticism of the dichotomy of post-colonial India, where women are revered as gods and mankind indirectly acknowledges her power, and yet they are set aside behind the curtain, the parda or the andar mahal that I keep talking about, in continuation of a politics of suppression. So Tagore's phantasmagoric world is, built around a world of cards, country of cards implying the caprice of discordance. The metaphor of cards is an ironic projection of two-dimensional sterility. In such a topos, the logos is bound by steroid. Even they speak in a staccato kind of disjuncted language. There is no place and time for ornamentation or description. Leaders lead in this country, followers follow, obedience is obeyed. There is no laughter, no weeping, no passion or emotion, no sensuous lovemaking, but mechanical procreativity. The prince represents the voice of dissensus that infects the women of card country. And this is a time when, this was written in around 1933. So this was pre-independence. But when we come to post-independence era, then India is physically free of British rule. India is not under imperialism at all. It saw the emergence of a new nation, a political democracy of multiple cultures, religions, languages. But the aftermath of colonial rule, what Tagore had warned us about, saw the emergence of numerous aspects of subjugation and subversion. If the imperialist was not oppressing the colonized. In this case, it was the emergence of subjugation in the field of caste sectarianism and in gender discrimination. The Indian nation proved the fear of Tagore to be true, in that though the nation was politically free, the marginalized entities continued to be entrapped in fetters. The authoritarianism of the colonial ruler was displaced by the iron rule of family. Violence of dictatorial rule was replaced by domestic violence. Within the state and within the family, that Spivak likes to call epistemic violence. This violence need not be physical or actual, but it is equally palpable in its ghost presence in society. This brings me directly, and it is almost a jump of a number of decades when I come to Girish Karnad and his Naga Mandala. When he was interviewed, because you see, he was born in 1938 in pre-independent India, and he just died last year. When he was interviewed, he gave a very interesting comment. He said, "My generation was the first to come of age after independence of British rule. After we became independent of British rule. It therefore had to face a situation in which tension, implicit until then, had come out in the open and demanded to be resolved without apologies or self justification. Tension between the cultural past and its colonial past. Thus, in the historical context that this is the historical context that gave rise to my plays and those of my contemporaries. So I have particularly chosen Nagamandala because this is a play that is read in Bankura University and also in Kazi Nazrul University, my university. And most of us are familiar with the story. So I will not go into the detailing of the story, but it is, we all know that Nagamandala is or play with a cobra, is the story of a young girl who is locked up in a house post marriage. Her husband locks her up, comes for lunch, does not give her the physical, emotion, or psychological sanction of his life partner and wife. Rather, she is kept in a kind of a, a margin of her own, into which enters the Naga, who is by a magic potion that he took inadvertently, he has fallen in, supposedly fallen in love with Rani, and he enters at night when her husband is absent, interestingly in the shape of her husband, in the figure of her husband. So this again is a very interesting allegory where, I like to think that Rani's husband Apana and the Naga are the two faces of patriarchy, of male citizenship in the world, in this universe. Where there is the suppressor, there is also the life giver. Also, Carnot's use of myth and the mythical importance of the Naga, because we all know that the Naga represents the Shiva, who is a kind of a fertility symbol, not just in Maharashtra but also in the whole of India. And Shiva is also one of the three crowns of our religious trinity. Shiva is the destroyer. So it is not very hard to imagine that maybe the Naga has come as a psychological, emotional, and physical, fertilizer of Rani as she emerges from a girl to a woman. The Naga is also the mythic representation of the destroyer as he comes to destroy the subversion and subjugation of the women in that situation. So when at the end of the story, and there is also a very interesting enactment of the Ramayana myth in Nagamandala, when at the end of the story, when Rani is accused by her husband of adultery, the people of the village ask her to take a test by fire. And she chooses the test by cobra. So like Sita, even Rani of the modern world, the post-independent Indian scenario is, is forced to take the role of Sita and has to go for a test. It is another matter that she proves successful in this test. And she is immediately deified from the hidden woman, the marginalized, the second sex, the second woman in the house. She suddenly is revered as the goddess. When the semi-educated, the gullible people of the village, when they are awed at the sight of the Naga, protecting Rani on top of her head, they fall at Rani's feet and accords to her the greatness of a goddess. Rani enjoys a reversal of situation from a defenseless maid to a revered goddess. In this case, in this aspect, I would like to just this is a stage presentation of Nagamandala, and I would like to share with you this wonderful theory described by Niloufar Bharucha, who is one of the leading present thinkers of post-colonial theory in India. She said that the women of Indian society have three roles to play. The three-pronged, attitude. The first is the Devi. The Devi is the ideal Indian woman, the Sati Savitri, the Sharat Chandra woman protagonist who does not think about herself, who has no wish, who has no hunger for food, for emotion, for love, for care, for sex, nothing. She is happy to serve. She is the perfect picture of Indian womanhood. That is the Devi. The second is the Devdasi. The Devdasi is the public woman, obviously, the whore, the prostitute. And yet, who is necessary? I remember when I was very young, I was very small in school, I think. There was this typical Hindi movie where a woman was, balancing between his wife and his mistress. And the mistress is not allowed into the boundary of the house. So she stands outside and sings a soulful song in the voice of Lata Mangeshkar, Main Tulsi Tere Aangan Ki. So that is the role of the Devdasi. She is marginalized in the sense that she is a necessary, shall I say, a wheel in the passage of civilization, and yet she is not allowed into the perfect domestic picture. Even in Nagamandala, Rani's husband Appana has a mistress outside, which is why he is behaving in this boorish manner with Rani. And at the end of this transformation of Rani's position in society, that public woman, that so-called Devdasi, she comes and serves Rani's household as a servant, divorcing from her all the physical passion with which she had attracted Appana. And the third role, according to Bharucha, was the Dayan, the vamp, the witch. The Dayan brings us such negative pictures of womanhood, like the witches of Macbeth. So she, the vamp, she is the symbol of patriarchy within the society of women. Those of you in your honors classes have read Silence the Courtesan session. We can say that Mrs. Kashikar may be the Diane of the story because she is replaying the patriarchal role in that play. So here, in the case of Rani, when she is transformed, she is immediately transformed from the Dasi to the Devi, from the slave to the goddess. So she, with the help of the Naga, with the help of this mythic character, she sort of, she has a reversal of situation from a defenseless maid to a revered goddess. Her belligerent and ill-humored husband becomes the supportive and docile partner that every woman wishes for and imagines for. She raises the Naga's son as her own. And there are, two or three multiple ends to this play. In one of them, she is innocently unaware of Naga's role in her life. Or is she, I posit this question to the readers of Nagamandala, is she as innocent? Does a woman not understand the difference of touch of two males? And that is written in the text by Karnad himself. The Naga takes refuge in her long dark hair and thus stays close to her. Though he is racked with grief at the loss of the girl he loved so much. So which means that the protective, the supportive face of patriarchy is not totally negated, though Appana is transformed into a supportive partner. This play questions and exposes the gender-biased values and morals of patriarchy, which controls, dictates, and silences the voice of women. It is ironical that she regains her voice and individual identity only after deification, only after she becomes the Devi, the post-colonial Indian woman may either be subjugated or may be valorized. So in conclusion, I humbly posit that the voice of dissensus in colonial and post-colonial India have been those of women, whether it was the women of the allegorical card country or Rani of post-independence India. India is the land where the mother goddess Durga is endowed with the cumulative strength of all male gods. Thus, voices of dissensus emerge from them. So, whether it is Tagore or Carnot and his contemporaries who used the literary conventions and discourses inherited from the colonizer, appropriated, translated, decentered, and hybridized them in ways that we now name as post-colonial.
Thank you so much, ma'am, Dr. Sharbani Banerjee Mukherjee, ma'am, for your illuminating and thought-provoking lecture. Thank you very much. Now, may I request Dr. Naragopal Mukherjee, Reader, Department of English, Bankura Christian College, for conducting the interactive session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Bipasha, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you, Sharbani, Dr. Sharbani Banerjee Mukherjee, for this wonderful deliberation, and it was really mesmerizing. We were just charmed at both your voice and your interpretation. Now the floor is open for questions. Whosoever wants to ask question directly may just unmute themselves and ask the questions directly to Dr. Sharbani Banerjee. Or you can also put your questions in the chat box. As I find it here, Sharbani, your friend again, Professor Gautam Buddha Shural, has asked in the chat box, should I invite him to ask the question directly? Professor Shural, are you there? Anyways, the question is a wonderful post-colonial interpretation of Tagore's play, this one, regarding your deliberation. Don't you think the title of the play foretells the fall of the British rule in India like the fall of a house of cards? Now,
Dr. Mukherjee, you are muted. Dr. Naragopal Mukherjee, you are muted probably.
okay, Sharbani, now unmute yourself and ask and respond to Professor Sural's question.
Thank you so much for that wonderful question, Professor Shural, my very good old friend, because this gives me an opportunity to at least, talk about it for a minute in passing. Because when I was studying card country, I found that there were so many interpretations that the title itself is allegorical. The title itself, is a kind of a, shall I say, a fist in the face of imperialism, because Tasher Desh is like, falling off a pack of cards. Absolutely. Not only that I completely agree with you, but I thank you for, putting this question, because that itself, the title itself, behoves of the post-colonial impact of that play. Thank you so much. Absolutely.
Sharbani, the second question is from Sostik Devghoria,
Yes.
from Sidhu Kanu Birsa University, Purulia. She wants to convey her thanks to you. Oh no, it is Sostik. I'm sorry. He wants to thank you for your tremendous explanation of the topic. Your efforts are really to be appreciated. I have a simple question to ask. He asks, how English will help the students like us to do something better for the future? I think this is a question not exactly related to what you are discussing.
Okay, since he has asked, let me answer it in the easiest possible way. By English, I am not sure what you are asking. Are you asking about English language or English literature? If you say English language, then English language, since it is, I personally feel that English language is standing at a very important crossroad, because the writing of language has taken to typing the language, and the mouthing of the language has given place to enunciating the language in SMS English. So the language needs preservation, and not just by old people like us, but the new generation. We should, as teachers of colleges, schools, nurseries, we should, inspire our little ones to write and read more rather than view and text less. That is as far as language is concerned. And if we are talking about literature, literature has always been the greatest teacher to mankind, because literature is nothing but a reenactment of reality. Now that we are in the pandemic situation, you can see so many talks are on the plague of the 1660s, the plague of 1720, the Spanish flu of 1910 and 20. So you see, those writings, because literature was there, because writing was there, we have the opportunity to go back to them, to relive them and take lessons from them. That is so important.
Thank you, Sarvanidhi, once again. Next question is from Shatabdi Roy, previously a guest faculty of our college and now a guest faculty of Amar Kanun College. Thank you, ma'am, for such an insightful presentation. Tagore considered imperialism as an external expression of nationalism. So can we say that he cherished the idea of imperialism? Sarvanidhi.
I don't know from where you have got this comment, but when I was reading Tagore's book, his speeches on nation and nationalism, and if not just Tasher Desh, we should also go back and read Ghore Baire, where Tagore is relentlessly talking about not imperialism. He is really actually asking us, the Indians, to learn from the free freedom of the women, the freedom of human generations, in order to be able to express ourselves freely, to breathe freely. Because you see, he himself was living in an imperial state. So imperialism to him was, had imperialism been a positive force?
Sorry, ma'am, to interrupt you. I just asked, did he cherish the idea of internationalism, not imperialism, ma'am? The question, I got it wrong.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, of course, the very name that he gave to his university, Vishwa Bharati, itself is, the greatest statement of his love for internationalism. He always felt that India should not be confined to Indianism. He always felt that the more we open up and we are able to, open up to the world and come up to the par of world thinkers, world activity, world freedom struggles, only then will we be able to, to develop as proper Indians. He was always for internationalism. You can see that in his music, the way he incorporated Spanish tunes, British tunes, Scottish tunes, in his writings, in his prose, in his poetry, everywhere He breeds internationalism, of course.
Thank you both Shorbanidhi and Shatabdi Roy for timely intervening and correcting the question, Shatabdi. Thank you so much for that also. Now, the next question is from Alekho Mondol. First of all, she wants to compliment you. Thank you for this excellent and anecdotal lecture, ma'am. And then her question, do you consider the way Tagore uses laughter that he also incorporates elements of absurdism? Now, Shorbanidhi, elements of absurdism.
Absurdism. I mean, see, in literature, you know, we are in post-Einsteinian world of relativity. We are free to interpret a text in any way we choose, I'm sure. Of course, the card country does reflect aspects of absurdism, you know, as I was telling you, Kanmola, Kanmochorano Ain, Ota Bosha, you know, Hatcho, that they were born. So, you know, that again was a laughing at the birth of mankind as propounded by Christianity, that Adam was created by God and Eve was born out of Adam's rib. So that kind of a story or an anecdote was underplayed and it was laughed at in the fact in Tashede they said that Bishwa Kamani Hachi theke Tashede Udbhav. So they are out of, so this is absurd, definitely. We do need, when, as Bakhtin said, that in an authoritarian state, when you have no other weapon in your hand, when you cannot shoot back, when you cannot hit back, you have to protest with laughter and you have to protest with the absurd, of course.
The next question is from Devopriya Guho, one of our students, and she wants to explain you further what role Naga is playing in the post-colonial perspective. What role Naga is playing?
In the post-colonial perspective, Naga, I feel, is the male identity that is expected of society and not what the usual male 80%, 90% of the males that were as represented by Apana. And I am not only blaming Rani's husband. If you read the text carefully, you will find that Rani is a very young girl who is sent with her husband. Who is she sent by? She is sent by her father. There is no presence. You see, when in the beginning of the drama, when she is alone and she's trying to, you know, trying to combat her loneliness by dreaming and imagining, she dreams herself in her father's and mother's house and how much she was loved. I ask this question. If she was loved as much as she thinks she was, why did her father also leave her and did not come to inquire how she was? So I keep saying that, I have said this in a previous webinar as well, that the women are, you know, made to feel completely rootless. Because in their premarital house, they are paradhan. In their postmarital house, they are parir badi mein. So they have no geography of their own. Forget about a room of their own, as Virginia Woolf wanted the woman to have. They do not have a moment of their own, a spot of their own. And in this case, Naga represents that what the society should be, that could help a woman to flower, that could help the woman to fertilize. By fertilize, I just don't mean her physical pregnancy. You see, Rani transforms from a timid girl to a wonderful woman who then is controlling. She decides that her son is going to do the last rites of the Naga, of the snake that was found in the house. So she commands, and this change was brought about. This change was sculptured by Naga. Sometimes I compare Naga Mandala, the story of Rani and Naga, to the Pygmalion Galatea myth. Rani was like a sculpture of stone, just as Pygmalion breathed life into Galatea and made her his own. In similar manner, Naga is the man who should be. Naga is the man who can make woman his life partner and an equal in this society of inequality.
Thank you, Sharbani. Now, the next question is from Dr. Suranjana Bhadra. Suranjana, would you like to ask the question directly? Suranjana, are you there? Would you like to ask the question directly?
Yes, I'm there. Sharbani, thanks a lot for this wonderful interpretation.
Thank you for being here. I'm so moved.
Thank you, Sharbani. I always love your lectures a lot.
Oh God.
And Sharbani, just I have an observation. That is,
Yes, sure.
Isn't this myth of Rani a kind of alternative version of the Ahulla myth? So, from the post-colonial perspective, I just want to point out that it is a strategy of revoking the ancient myths, trying to retrieve the myths and trying to reread or reevaluate it from the perspective of the post-colonial woman. So,
absolutely, absolutely, and not just the Ahulla myth. The Rani is, if you really read it carefully, it is the reenactment of the Behula Lokhinder myth. It is a reenactment of the Sabitri Satyavan myth. So you see, these ladies, they take the forefront and they sort of, regroup and reorient the patriarchal view. So Sabitri, the way she got back her dead husband. So it is not just physical death. It is a kind of a death of the preconceived notion and a rebirth of a new man. Same for the Ahulla myth. I absolutely agree with you, because Garnard was one, apart from his contemporaries like Tendulkar and Badal Sharkar. I think Garnard was the man who has constantly, fallen back upon myth and folklore in order to make his. You see, when we talk about, I also wanted to speak about Hayavadana, because in Hayavadana, the rewriting of Thomas Mann's transposed heads, where the heads are changed. So
yes.
there again, if we find the two faces of the male persona, you see, and
also it is the woman, yes, who is taking the major role.
Yes, the pivot of all these folklores and myths is incidentally the woman. That is very interesting. Thank you, Suranjana, for pointing that out, because that is very relevant, very, very relevant.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Suranjana, and thank you, Sharbani. Now, the next one is from Stella Basu. Ma'am, could you please repeat that 3 types of women? As I had internet glitches, I was not able to hear it clearly. Okay, this is one more question. Will you respond to that first?
Yes, that is very simple, because Nilofer, I had the occasion to hear her personally, and I was enthralled by this interpretation that she divides the the women in a patriarchal system under those 3 heads of Devi, Devdasi, and Dayan. It is easy to understand in these terrible serials that are shown in the television every day, that our mothers and grandmothers like to watch. You will find the replaying of these personas all the time. There is a perfect woman, there is the fallen woman, and there is the negative woman who actually is used as a tool of torture to the women themselves, and they replay the negative patriarchal role. So the Devi, the Devdasi, and the Dayan. That was what I said.
Okay, this is for an information to all, that if you miss certain parts of lecture because of internet glitches or maybe something like that, you can go to YouTube lecture that is being streamed now, but the next session will not be streamed although. Anyway, next question from
Dr. Narugopal Mukherjee, just sorry for interrupting you. Just a little announcement. Professor Kaur is having some technical glitches, so he needs some time to be here. So you can freely continue the interactive session now. And there are a number of questions I see in the chat box. Thank you.
Bad news for me, I think.
Thank you so much, Oyun, for giving me this opportunity to interact with Sorbanidhi and also to the viewers to interact with her. Anyway, next question is from Abhishek Day. Ma'am, just to bring a cross-reference, can't we say Miss Binare of Tendulkar, Vijay Tendulkar, too holds post-colonial discourse on gender liberty? Your valuable take on this, please.
Of course. I mean, that is what Silence the Court is in Session is all about, because the very title gives way to what Tendulkar has in mind. When he says Shantata or silence, he tries to say that that is what the society is all about: suppression, of closure, of polemically, submerging the voice. That is why the women have always been called the voiceless other. And if you read Silence very carefully, you will find that in the play, whenever Benare is speaking, the stage is put in a freeze movement, which means that Benare is speaking, but is the society listening to her? That is the important question. And if the audience is listening to her, the characters on the stage, who all are symbolically representing one aspect of Indian society. Remember that there is a professor, there is a neo-actor, there is a neo-academic, there is a woman, and there is a villager who is the rustic. So they are all, like Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, they are a cross-section of Indian society. But none of them allow, at least for Rani in Nagamandala, she had the mythic Naga to bring her out of her hole. But in Benare, there is nobody. She also has been fertilized by another so-called academic, a professor, who denies his parenthood there. But Benare is silenced completely. She is pulled and pushed into the court chamber, the mock court chamber. She is provoked. She is attacked. It is a kind of a hunting game where she is the hunted animal and all the others are after her and she is running for her life. But nobody is actually listening to her, because whenever she is speaking, the stage is freezed. That is very, very, telling. Of course, it is a post-colonial discourse. Of course. Thank you, Abhishek.
Thank you, Sarvanidhi. Just a request here to our students. Some of you, could you please leave the platform for the time being for 5 minutes or so, and so that Onsuman can find an entry.
Professor Kaur is already here. Professor Kaur is already here.
Okay, thankfully. Okay, then it's okay. Then the next question, Sarbanidhi, is from one of our students, Sonia Chatterjee. Thank you so much, ma'am. It is a beautiful presentation. My question is, Tagore, as a nationalist, wanted to break all the rigid boundaries of the society and the self, so-called Ocholayoton. Is there any post-colonial approach then?
See, I have read Ocholayoton many, many years ago. I do not remember the text very carefully, so I don't think it will be right for me to comment here. But the first part of your question is, of course, that Tagore has, if you really follow Tagore's life and his activities, we actually concentrate more on his Rabindra Sangeet and more on his Sanchoita, and less on the other more important, more society changing things that he did. And in them, his brand of nationalism that he said was that nationalism does not only mean the propagation of India and Indianness, it means the divorcing of all tools of suppression and subjugation from the psyche. That is where he said that nationalism will bring in a sense of nationalism, not just India and Indianness, because that also gives rise to another kind of authoritarianism, another kind of neo-imperialism that we are, of course, today. We can see how those negativities have affected our free movement in the country. So that is what I have to say. Achalayatan, I don't really remember too well.
Okay, from Mohina.
Dr. Mukherjee, Professor Kaur, he's having some serious internet problems. So if we could stop the interactive session for the time being,
I think so.
I think ma'am will be here with us. We can continue with the next session and then come back.
Sorry, Sharbani, actually, I'm having so many problems today, since morning, and net is, it's horrible here. So through my phone, actually, I'm trying to connect, and that's why I asked Oyon that just allow me to leave the meeting. Let Sharbani continue. After she finishes, I'll join. But this is not something which is done, Oyon. You cannot stop Sharbani asking that.
No. Hey,
No, sir, not that.
It is already 12. So we are already eating into your time. Absolutely.
No. I'll be happy to.
No, we can continue this after you finish.
I really don't know for how long I'll be able to continue. Meaning my using my hotspot, I have been able to join. Wi-Fi is not.
Madam will be with us, so that's not a problem at all. We can have our questions later also.
Have the questions here.
Okay.
You know how much I love to listen to Om Shuman. Om Shuman knows that. So let us have that first. That is more interesting. These questions can go on and on, so we can take that later. Absolutely, Om Shuman.
Thank you, Sharbani, and now it's over to Bipasha. Bipasha, are you there? Bipasha?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, let us begin with the second
Thank
session.
you, sir.
Please.
Our second speaker is